Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Forshaw. I'm the Managing Director of Maxwell Stevens. I'm delighted this afternoon to be with David Emanuel, who's the Managing Director of IWFM. Good afternoon, David.
Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely superb, thanks. Nice to see you again. It's been quite a while.
It has been.
David, both myself and you are not practicing FM professionals, clearly, but we've both been on I know I'm 20 years in, and I know you've had a decent stint in the industry. We're not practicing professionals, but we sit on the edge of the industry, of the network. We regularly liaise with these professionals. What's your take on the current situation?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is because we're not right in the centre, we can actually take a step back and get a bit of perspective and see the wood for the trees. So I think that for FM, we've got opportunities. I think obviously we've had an impact, we've had challenges, and I think now we've got opportunities. And I think for the industry, well, for the sector, because I like to think there's a difference between the industry, the sector and the profession, I think we've got some real opportunities to get the profession recognised better than it ever has been. But I just fear that we're going to miss that opportunity because I'm not quite sure who in the UK is actually going to raise the bar for us. There are obviously plenty of organisations out there that can do it. I'm just not necessarily seeing it being done.
What's your take on the current leadership then in the industry?
I think it depends on which association or professional group we're looking at. And I think it's radically different between, I think basically there's 3 or 4 main organisations. You've got the IWFM, you've got the RICS, and you've got IFMA. And I think sitting on the sort of the industry side of it rather than the profession, you've got the BSA. So if you look at the first 3, I think the RICS is doing quite a sterling job. I think it always has. There are those that think that it's not really FM. They're not really that concerned with it. But I think it's a great opportunity for the RICS to raise the bar. And I think that they've taken a very strategic look at what FM should be about. I think IWFM and IFMA are very much more sort of about the practitioners. It's more about the sort of the operations and practitioners. I've seen a lot of stuff coming out of IFMA. I'm a little bit biased because obviously I'm the treasurer of the IFMA UK chapter. I think with IWFM, I haven't really seen a great deal of leadership. I think that's one of the key issues. I haven't really seen that much leadership. I haven't seen that much engagement. I think they've been very late in the day at making decisions about what they were doing. So if you look at their conference, for example, that was supposed to initially take back in the spring, it's got a hell of a long time to postpone that, whereas others made their decision quite decisively. It then came around that it was going to be in September, at the end of September. And again, it was quite obvious that, these conferences couldn't be taken place in a physical environment. And they've taken a hell of a time to make up their decision to make it a virtual one. I also think that the content, it was devised last autumn. It's the content or their program was a year old. I think they should have rethought it, created a new strategy for it. And I think that they're just not getting out there. They have done some good webinars. That's fair to be said. But I think they've mainly been done by Martin Reed, who's the editor of Facilitate magazine. And they've been very good. But in terms of IWFM taking leadership and saying, okay, FMs need to collaborate much further with HR, IT. We are the professional group that are going to help you get back into the workplace. I don't really see that as being done.
I think from my perspective, part of the issue has been this massive COVID thing hanging over us. It's been very awkward for organisations to carry on business as usual, furlough of staff. Maybe it's partly because the staff haven't been there and they've not thought at the time. Like the reality is, it's been a huge period where everyone else has had a lot on their minds, hasn't it? So
I think with the IWFM in particular, so whilst it's supposed to be an institute, I really think that it's developed over the years into more of a training provider than it is a members institute, and I think that is where its real focus is. And I think the issue is that BIFM when it was BIFM training, that was done as a joint venture with Quadrilect.
Yeah,
I think Quadrilect ran those courses extremely well.
it did, yeah.
And of course, the reason that they had it was because many years ago, BIFM outsourced it to Quadrilect. And as a cost-cutting exercise, when IWFM had, as it was, BIFM had gone to its second term of near insolvency and had used up £500,000 worth of its assets and was pretty much financially on its knees. It looked at all measures it could to cut costs. And one of those things they decided to do was to bring the training in-house. Well, I think that's been a disaster for both Quadrilect and for IWFM. I don't think people are doing the training. I think obviously with COVID, again, there are impacts, there are challenges, there are opportunities. And I think that they haven't responded to that. I don't think their online trainings really worked. Obviously, they can't do physical training. And I think that that's caused a few problems. But I just don't believe that. I think that there's too much focus on them being a training provider that happens to do a conference and also has an awards evening or gala dinner. Then it really is about a members institute and giving them good practical skills. And of course, I think the heartland of IWFM is all about the regions and the networking. And of course, that's just not possible at the moment. So unless you are doing qualifications and getting a discount from your membership from doing them, I can't really see the value.
Sat there it's been a difficult period for everyone, hasn't it? And yeah, there's just where are the voices coming from to take us through this? We've talked about, whether the FMs are going to live up to the expectation and be able to lead and get recognised and all the rest of it. And, clearly the industry needs sort of support. So where do you see the future of the industry / profession and or sector?
So to define the difference between them all, I think encompassing the whole lot is the sector. I think the industry is all those organisations that support facilities management. So there are, there's cleaning, there's security, there's catering, there's hospitality, there's all of those. And then the profession is really the FMs that manage all of that. So I've always said there's a difference between facility services and facilities management. Management is the management. And I think that a lot of the difference is that FM needs to be strategic as well as operational. So where do I think the future is? I think the future is clearly going to change. I think the danger is that people look at FM and think of it as the cleaning sector, and we're not. Cleaning's just a very valuable part of the whole sector. Our opportunity is that we need to, we've never had a seat at the table with the board. And I'm not necessarily saying that we need a seat, but we certainly need to be listened to. And I think that the opportunity now is, let's be listened to in collaboration with HR and IT, because we're going to have to work with them to make sure that we get people back into the workplace and we get them back there safely. And I think the whole issue is not everyone is going to go back immediately. And I think that we're going to have to, for property, it's always been location, location, location. And I kind of feel that for facilities management, it's got to be about flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. And I think that's going to be the key. And I think that, there are those that have had very different experiences from working from home. I know the Leesman Index has done a fantastic job of surveying it, and the results have been quite shocking, I think, to many, that people can work as productively or perceived to be as productive from home as they have been in the highest performing offices that Leesman has surveyed. And so I think there are those that are still going to remain home. I think that those are going to work from home more often. And then there are those that are going to have to be back in the office environment and need to be there, as often as they were. But I don't think it's a binary thing. I think that it's different for different organisations and for different people within those organisations. And I think the experiences have been very different for everyone.
So office reopenings. So I've been speaking to a lot of people recently, and office reopenings, there's talk in London, for example, of quite a few companies going back, sort of starting to offer the opportunity to someone to go back in September. So do office reopenings mean a return to the old normal, or do you think the future of that is, as you just touched on, it's going to be different?
I think it's going to be different. I think it's going to be low density in terms of the usage. You can't have people sitting face to face. We've got to try and operate the 2 metre rule, or at least the 1 metre plus.
So taking account of the COVID rules, do you not feel that these organisations are going to have to keep the same amount of office space to accommodate, obviously, more space apart from each other, meeting rooms, breakout areas, meeting areas, whilst allowing sort of the COVID regulations? Or do you feel that there'll be less demand for offices as they are?
I think it's going to depend on various different organisations. So in principle, I think that the answer is you can't have as many people in the office as you would have done before. Yeah. That's just a given. So it's then a question of how you utilise that space. Are you going to utilise that space so that it's more of a co-working space for people, so that they're or collaborative space? Are you going to do it so that there's more flexibility in terms of the workplace, so that people can work from home more often? And I think so. I'm not sure whether or not there will obviously be those organisations that are going to rush off to dispose of space. But I also think that third spaces are going to be used a lot more. So obviously the office is going to be used differently and for less people. I think the home will be used much more than it was prior to COVID. And I think third spaces are going to be used much more. But I also think that the geography of where space offices were is going to change. So I think that there's a lot of co-working spaces in the cities that are going to be in trouble. I think that, WeWork, for example, owns about, or doesn't own, rents 10% of the square mile. I'm not so sure that those are going to be so useful, but I think that other spaces in sort of more satellite or towns are going to be much more prevalent, and I think that we'll see more of those opening up. So I think that we'll see more third spaces being used. And of course, I think the FM's responsibility is going to have to be to look at practices at home. Sometimes we're going to have to look and say, is the workplace fit for purpose? And that's what part of the health and safety element of work of FM is. Is the home fit for purpose? Because some of them aren't. There are people working off of ironing boards, sitting at the end of the beds, working at the kitchen table, and none of those are really designed to have people working for an 8-hour period.
There'll be the people who will want to go back to the office, though, surely.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that people that want to go back are obviously people that are flat sharing, haven't got any dedicated space. So I think those with dedicated space, I think people with young families probably want to go back to the office as soon as they go back to school as well. So it is. I think it's a very different mix depending on what stage of life you are, and what your socioeconomic background is, and what kind of space you have at home.
Yeah. And
also what type of job you're doing. I mean, let's not forget that there's an awful lot of people out there on furlough.
It was 10 million, I think.
Yeah. And then interestingly, when I was at the RICS Strategic FM conference, their head economist was looking at some data from Oxford University economists, and they were saying that the forecasts are, unemployment levels could rise between 12 to 14%, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's, Where were we before that? So that's basically everybody that was unemployed plus everybody on furlough added into that to give the new unemployment figures. That's a hell of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I hope that doesn't happen, but I do think that as furlough ends, redundancies are going to start. And obviously it's a spiralling effect. One sector affects another, affects another.
Yeah. You need to look after the supply chain, as we've talked about.
Exactly.
But I think out of every challenge comes an opportunity, doesn't it? So I think
it does.
There'll be many good guys out of this.
And I think you're going to have to look at things and say, you know, cleaning was hit really hard to start with. Well, now they're going to be very much more visible in the workplace. And they're going to be required to do a hell of a lot more often to keep the places clean. And I think that security guards, again, you know, I think that the security sector will bounce back and will benefit long term from this, because there will be high requirements of them, not just protecting people, but making sure that the people that are coming into the buildings are, you know, are safe and well. So
it's the re-emergence of the multi-skilled individuals, isn't it, really? I know people have been talking about this for a while, but picture the scene: less people in an office. Obviously, you don't need the same people to answer the phone, but you may need that person to answer the phone, greet the guests, be the security guard, take the post, as well as deal with the catering.
Yeah, I think the purists, well, so there is that integrated outlook of things. The purists would say, well, actually, if you're a security guard, there's a difference between being a security guard and a security officer. So, you know, if you're part of the Corps Commissionaires, you know, you've got years of experience and you've come from the forces and you've got better training. So therefore, they're looking at sort of employing people that are better trained and more experienced, and therefore you should pay a slight premium for that over and above just a low paid or minimum wage paid security guard. And I think the same with training. I think that you've got to look at it and say it's about how they're trained and what they're doing that should affect the pay. And I also think that you're going to have to, you know, I think there's opportunities and opportunists. Yeah. And I don't think all cleaning companies are the same, and certainly they're going through different standards. And I think that's probably where we've got a mismatch of leadership as well, is that we should be advising and creating certain new standards to make sure that everybody is safe in the workplace. I know that, for example, Sodexo have got, what are they called? The Commission of Veritas, to basically certificate their cleaning methodologies. I know that there are other organisations, and Mighty have got a self-certification for their clients to prove that, you know, that everything possible is being done. But I do think that cleaning regimes are very different from one organisation or one service provider to another.
No, I agree. David, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think we could have probably carried on our conversation for a lot longer. Thanks ever so much for your time. It's been fascinating listening to you. I'm glad you're surviving through these unusual times, and I'm very much looking forward to the future. The kids are going back next week.
I know.
So, you know, I'm hoping...
The Transportation Minister is advising everyone to go back to work. I do think we're going to start seeing things, you know, opening up, people going back to work. But of course, I do think that there should be some sort of, you know, leadership from the Prime Minister in the sense of do as you preach. The civil service haven't gone back, and I'm not quite sure you can expect the private sector to go back when the public sector haven't. So I do think it would be nice to see some leadership there too.